You're listening to Simply the Best Sports Take, the best podcast breaking down the best stuff in sports with host Sean Bingham. His takes are so good, he dropped the mic, but then you wouldn't be able to hear him, and that would suck.
Welcome into Simply the Best Sports Podcast. I am your host, Sean Bingham, and we have a jam-packed show today. A whole lot happened in the NFL, the NBA, college football. We're going to try and squeeze it all into 10 or 15 minutes just to give you guys that nice little sports fix you need. So let's dive right in. First thing on the docket, LeBron James, the king, ejected for the first time in his career last night. That's 1,081 career games, regular season, 217 playoff games, for a grand total of 1,298 games played without an ejection. Wow. Ejected for the first time ever against his former team, the Miami Heat. It was not that big of a deal if you saw it. He drove, felt like he got fouled. The call was not made. He kind of, aggressively went towards the referee, kind of throwing his fist and, obviously shouting. He got 2 T's quick and it was gone, and that was it. So he handled it really well after the game, made a funny Instagram post about his shoes, and we'll call these, the ejection game. Cavs continue to win, though. That's 9 in a row. But King James ejected. Really wasn't that big of a deal, except for the fact that it was his first game ever that happened. Kevin Love went off. LeBron got, it was third quarter was 3/4 of the way done when it happened. So the Cavs didn't miss him. The game was in hand, and Kevin Love and D-Wade finished strong, and the Cavs won big. So one thing, though, that I got to bring up, as long as we're on the LeBron topic, you know how much I love the guys at Fox Sports. They're actually my favorite. My favorite guys are Colin Cowherd, Skip Bayless, Shannon Sharp, Chris Carter, Nick Wright. Those guys, in my opinion, have surpassed ESPN. They're the guys that I look up to the most in this industry that I'm, kind of just have a hobby in, I guess, really, with this podcast. But Nick Wright is so over the top with LeBron James and his love for LeBron James. Yesterday on his show, he mentions how, he puts up LeBron's current stats for this year, and then he puts up stats of, an unknown player on the right side of the screen. And he says, and the stats that LeBron has are, slightly better in all the 4 categories that he puts up. And then he wants everyone to guess which team this is, or guess which player this is in his MVP season. And the answer is, it was actually Shaq's field goal percentage, KD's three-point percentage, Derrick Rose's assists, and Kobe Bryant's points. And LeBron's slightly better on all of them. And I'm like, okay, cool. I already know that it's going to be a twisted stat. I better dive right in and check this out. Well, and the argument is that LeBron right now this season is better than those guys at their best, at their, quote, absolute best. And I'm just like, okay, another misleading stat by Nick Wright, because maybe that season was considered their best in that they won the MVP that year. Even that doesn't mean it was necessarily their best season. But it certainly doesn't mean that was their best, for that statistical category. For instance, Kobe Bryant averaged more than 28 points a game several times in his career. The biggest one, though, that was just a laughable comparison is him comparing LeBron's field goal percentage to Shaq's. Well, the game evolves, things change. LeBron this season is 8th in the league in field goal percentage, okay? So is he shooting a high percentage? Yeah, absolutely. He totally is. But he's 8th in the league, okay? Shaq led the league that year. So Shaq's field goal percentage was the highest of anyone in the NBA that year. Okay, so the game evolves, things change, and if LeBron was leading the league, then it could be a comparison of apples to apples, but it wasn't. Furthermore, it was Shaq's 16th best field goal percentage for a season. Yes, you heard me correctly. In 15 different seasons, Shaquille O'Neal shot better than he did in the year he won his MVP, the 99-2000 season. 15 different times he shot better than that. So that was his 16th, and it was actually tied for 16th, which means there was a 17th season that was equal to or better than, but 15 were actually better than. Insane. It's a stupid comparison. It warrants no credit whatsoever, and I had to get into it with friends last night on Twitter and some people and help them see the light, because Nick Wright continues to lead people astray by taking stats and twisting them in LeBron's favor. He's not Michael Jordan, bro. Just give it up. He's not Michael Jordan. He never will be, and it's okay. Just appreciate him for what he is, a top 3 player of all time. Let's just leave it at that. Unless he somehow goes out and wins 2 or 3 more and is MVP of all of them, and he might even have to win 3 or 4 more in a lot of people's minds, because even though he's been to 8, the East is so incredibly weak that it's not super respected by a lot of people, and he hasn't shown well in 3 of the finals. So, anyway, that's I really want people to see it for what it is. And he's acting like these guys didn't have stellar seasons, or they didn't have good all around games, and it just isn't true. One of the things, if I look it up here, in Kevin Durant's MVP year, he averaged 32 points, 7.4 rebounds, 5.5 assists. I'd say that's a pretty good all-around stat line. Kobe Bryant, 28.3, 6.3, 5.4. Shaq, 29.7, 13.6 rebounds, 3 blocks. I mean, come on. Stupid comparisons. You want to know what LeBron leads the NBA in this year? Nothing. Minutes. He leads in minutes, which means he has more time on the floor to, gather up more stats that he doesn't have. Does he have a great all-around game? Is he the best player in the league? Yes, he is. But he actually leads the league in nothing except minutes, which should mean he should get more points, more assists, more rebounds. And if you're thinking right now to yourself, oh, well, but LeBron, best all-around player, he must lead in triple-doubles. No, he doesn't. That's Russell Westbrook. He has 3 times as many triple-doubles as LeBron. LeBron is tied with 2 rookies. One of them is named Lonzo Ball. Okay? So throw out even the best all-around. LeBron's the man. This is where it hurts so much for me, because I actually love LeBron James. I am a LeBron James fan, but I just see reality. And reality is he's not as good as Michael Jordan. And to me, that's perfectly fine. And you know what? I would love it if he proved me wrong. He definitely has not yet, but I would love it if he did, because I would be the first one to say, boom, that guy is better than MJ. I watched them both play throughout their careers. That guy is better. But he's not. And so these guys at Fox, they need to just tone it back a little bit, because it's kind of getting ridiculous. I know that it's clickbait, though. They want what I'm doing right now is exactly what they want. So maybe they don't even think it. But to pull one stat, to go to everybody's MVP season and find one stat. Okay, what is LeBron currently better at than his entire season? Oh, 3-point percentage. He's like 1% better. I'm going to choose that and show that means LeBron's a better player. Okay, well, I shoot a better free throw percentage than Shaq and LeBron. So I must be a better basketball player, right? Because in LeBron's MVP seasons, I could shoot a better free throw percentage than that. So I must be better than him at basketball, right? No, it's stupid. You can't just pull one stat that a guy's better. Anyway, I won't go any further with it. I've said my piece on that. Moving on. LeBron's the man. Let's just appreciate him for what he is. Okay. In other news, Eli Manning benched by Ben McAdoo for Geno Smith. His streak, speaking of streaks, of 210 consecutive starts ends. It is the second longest quarterback starting streak, behind only Brett Favre at 297. So Eli Manning benched for Geno Smith. Geno Smith has the lowest passer rating of any quarterback in the last 4 years, with at least 30 starts to qualify. Eli Manning has like the 6th lowest, by the way. But Eli Manning has won 2 Super Bowls, both against Tom Brady. This is nothing more than Ben McAdoo reaching and grasping at anything he possibly can to do his best to avoid the inevitable, which is him getting fired. Ben McAdoo will not be the coach of the New York Giants for much longer. and this is a reach. I don't see it paying off. I don't think there's any way that Geno Smith is better than Eli. Is Eli having a poor season? Yeah, he is. Is Eli inconsistent? Yeah, he is. Are the Giants really, really bad? Yeah, they are. But he lost Brandon Marshall. He lost Odell Beckham Jr. He has a really bad coach. It's not all Eli's fault, and Geno Smith is not the answer. Okay, that's my take on that. Ben McAdoo, you're going to be out of town pretty soon. In fact, there was a commentator in New York that said you should really go get a close look at Eli's 2 rings because it's the closest you'll ever come to one. And I agree with that. He's not going to last long, and he's grasping for anything he can to keep from getting fired. Can't really blame him in that regard, survival of the fittest, I guess. But Eli is the fall guy, was fighting back tears yesterday as he was being interviewed in the locker room about it. Feel for the guy, and I do not think it is the right decision. I do not think Geno Smith is the answer. But desperate times call for desperate measures, and that's what the Giants are doing. Speaking of new quarterback starts, Jimmy Garoppolo getting his first start for the San Francisco 49ers, which I think is pretty cool. I think it's smart of them to get him a few games before they're obviously not going to make the playoffs or anything, but smart to get him some games under his belt, try and start winning, see what he can do before they offer him some big extension or anything like that. Really see what he can do, and I hope he does really, really well, and they're really, really big on him, and I hope that Kyle Shanahan loves him. Want to know why? Because if they don't, my biggest fear would be that Kirk Cousins from the Redskins goes to San Francisco. I'm hoping the Redskins can keep Kirk Cousins. I'm hoping the Redskins continue to win, sneak into the playoffs. Washington's high on Kirk. Kirk's high on Washington. He stays, and then San Francisco, if they've got a guy that they feel decently good about, they'll stick with him and won't even bother offering Kirk the role. So I think Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be a baller. I think Jacoby Brissett will be a baller. Why do I bring both those guys up in the same name or in the same sentence? Because they were the two guys in the last however many years, 12, 15 years, whatever it's been, 17 years, that started in place of Tom Brady for a few games. And they actually did really, really well. Matt Castle did also, actually, who we've talked about before on this show. But in recent memory, it's been those two, Jacoby Brissett and Jimmy Garoppolo. And they both did really well. And I think that they both have potential. They're both on bad teams, the Colts and the Niners. But I think Garoppolo will do well. I hope he does. Okay, last thing we need to talk about today. We're going to spend a few minutes on this. And that is the new college football rankings came out. And I'm sure you know what they are. It was number 1. It was not Auburn, thank goodness. It was the deserving Clemson Tigers. I said it all along. Clemson deserves to be number 1. They're the best team in the country. They beat Auburn head-to-head, and they have a better record. So there's no way they should get jumped just because Auburn beat Alabama and Georgia, even though that is super, super impressive. They played each other head-to-head, and they beat Auburn. So I don't think we need to analyze much more than that. It was early in the season, but still, I don't think it's up to us to analyze who might be better between them now, especially if there have not been any significant injuries. And if there have been, it's actually more on the Auburn side. So Clemson is definitely deserving of number 1. Number 2, they did put Auburn. I was not surprised. I was a little bit disappointed because I don't know what Oklahoma did to warrant getting leapfrogged. I know that, of course, Auburn beat Alabama, who was number 1. I don't think Alabama this year is the Alabama that we're used to. They're still Alabama. They're still one of the top teams in the country, no doubt. But they've actually had a pretty weak schedule, and I don't think they're the team that everyone thinks they are. But Auburn jumps up to number 2. At number 3 was the Wisconsin Badgers. Was the Oklahoma Sooners, and at 4 was the Wisconsin Badgers. So I knew those would be the top 4. I knew it would be Clemson, Auburn, Wisconsin, Oklahoma. I didn't think that they'd move. I thought that Oklahoma would be 2, Wisconsin 3, Auburn 4. Well, I actually didn't think that. I didn't think the committee would do that. I think that's what it should be, and I still do. But I think we just need to let games be decided on the field a little bit more. which is why I'm glad they didn't put Auburn ahead of Clemson like many people were calling for. But the rankings are out, and what was most interesting is where they were going to put Wisconsin, where they were going to put Alabama, where they were going to put Ohio State. And Alabama was 5th, Georgia 6th, Miami, Ohio State. That's exactly kind of how we expected it to go, right? I mentioned the other day that Miami and Ohio State were tied at number 7 in the coaches poll, which I think was dead on. Well, in this one, they're not tied. Ohio State is slightly behind Miami. But here's how it's going to go. Bama's number 5, right where they should be. So it's going to come down to this. If Ohio State beats Wisconsin, which I believe they will, I've been saying it all along, even after the blowout loss to Iowa, which was just a month ago, I said, you watch, Ohio State's going to figure it out, and they're going to come roaring back. And guess what they've done since then? Ohio State since then has done the following. A 48-3 demolishing of number 12 Michigan State, 52-14 destruction of Illinois, and a 31-20 beatdown on the road at rival Michigan. Those are the 3 games that Ohio State has put together since losing badly to Iowa. Obviously, the Iowa loss is a huge eyesore. They lost by 31 points on the road at Iowa. Iowa is a good team, though. I'm hearing people call them a marginal team, an average team. They're not an average team. They're a good team. They're a slightly above average team. They're not a great team. It's not a game to brag about necessarily if you win. But it's not a game to be ultra ashamed of if you lose. The big problem here is that they didn't just lose. They got beat down hard by 31 points, 55-24. So that is the biggest obstacle in the way of the Buckeyes. That, and of course, the one team in their way is Alabama, the biggest, most respected program in the country, slightly ahead of the Buckeyes themselves. So what it's going to come down to is the committee's going to have to decide, okay, how much do we value a win over number 4, which is where Wisconsin currently is? What about when you couple that with wins over number 2, Penn State, and number 12, Michigan State? Currently, those teams are number 9 and number 16. So those teams are still very, very highly respected. The only reason they're not numbers 2 and 12 anymore is because Ohio State beat them. So they dropped. And now, if you add to that resume a win over the number 4 team, the only undefeated team in a Power 5 conference, I don't see how that isn't a better resume and proves that they're playing better right now than Alabama, whose best wins are currently number 17, LSU, and number 23, Mississippi State. So Ohio State will have 3 wins over teams more highly ranked and more respected, more difficult teams than anyone that Alabama beat. They will have 3 of them. Okay? Now, I mentioned yesterday that I was nervous that the committee and that the pollsters were already kind of fudging with the bottom of the rankings to make it look like Fresno State's more deserving than they really are, because guess what? Alabama scheduled them. Alabama beat them. Looked like a cupcake of a game. Fresno State Bulldogs now 9-3 and sneak in at number 25. Why is that significant? Because now they can point to it and be like, oh, that's another team that's ranked right now that we beat. Okay, so let's get this straight. You're telling me that Michigan is not as good as Fresno State. Michigan's 8-4, and guess who they've lost to? They've lost to Ohio State, number 8, Penn State, number 9, Michigan State, number 16, and Wisconsin, number 4. So Michigan has beaten everybody they've played except for 4 teams, all of which are ranked in the top 16. 3 of which are ranked in the top 10. And you're telling me that Fresno State is better than Michigan. I don't think anyone in their right mind would say if Fresno State played Michigan, that Fresno State would be the winner. In fact, let's just ask Vegas. Let's ask Vegas who would be favored if those two matched up in a bowl game. I'll bet you it would be Michigan by 14 points. But yet they've got Fresno State at number 25, and it's wrong. It's just dead wrong. Fresno State does not belong there. I really hope Boise State beats them in the Mountain West Championship game. This Saturday is packed with awesome games, by the way. I cannot wait. Although they do have the ACC Championship at the same time as one of the other big ones, which kind of disappointed me. Let me look that up real quick. Because I was looking at the schedule. Yes, we've got the Pac-12 Championship, Stanford USC. The AAC, Memphis UCF. That's actually a really good matchup. 10-1 Memphis versus UCF, 11-0. TCU Oklahoma is a good one. Georgia Auburn, of course, is a great one. And then, the other, it's the Big Ten Championship. So Ohio State and Wisconsin play at the same time as Miami and Clemson. So get your clicker finger ready because you're going to have to be switching back and forth, put two TVs side by side, do something. But those are two big games. So obviously there's a lot of football left to be played. One game for each team. But there's so much is riding on this. So the committee has said, look, Alabama's 5th, and I think they're deserving. So what's going to happen is Georgia, Auburn, one of them's going to lose. They're both ranked ahead of Ohio State. One of them loses, which means they slide below Ohio State if Ohio State wins. So this is all assuming Ohio State wins, which I think they will. So you got to assume they'll jump Wisconsin because they will have just beaten them, and they're only 4 spots behind them right now. So they'll jump them. So now that moves them up to 7. Then you've got Georgia and Auburn. You got to assume the loser of that's going to slide below Ohio State. Auburn might be number 2. They'd have to slide several spots, but they will have 3 losses at that point. You'd think Auburn would slide, and there's no way they'd get in the playoffs with 3 losses. So Georgia, of course, is number 6. They'd slide below. So now that moves Ohio State up to number 6. Then you have Clemson and Miami. If Miami no matter which team wins, they're only going to have 2 losses, which is the same as Ohio State, but they don't have the same resume. They don't have the same strength of conference, and they'll still have 2 losses. I would think very strongly that whoever loses that game also slides below Ohio State, which now moves Ohio State up to number 5. So, and that's where Alabama currently sits. So the question is, what do you value more? Is it a bigger deal that Ohio State lost a month ago to Iowa by 31, and that they also lost early in the season to Oklahoma? Or is it a bigger deal that they beat the number 2 team in the country, still ranked in the top 10? They beat the number 12 team in the country, still ranked in the top 16. They beat the number 4 team in the country, who would still be ranked in the top 10. What's more important? The bad loss against Iowa or the very obvious better resume of quality wins than Alabama, whose best wins are number 17 LSU and number 23 Mississippi State. And by the way, the Fresno State game that everyone's going to point to and say it's another top 25 win is total BS, and Michigan should be in that spot. Michigan is better at 8-4. There's other 8-4 teams in there. Big Ten's the best conference in college football. Big Ten East is the best division in college football. To me, it's a joke that Michigan's not number 25, which would be another little notch on the post for Ohio State. So we'll see what happens. Sunday is D-Day. Saturday is the big day of all the games. I'm stoked. Can't wait to see what happens. That's all for today. I'm out. Peace.
Thanks for hanging with Simply the Best Sports Take. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and check out stbsportstake.com. Simply the best in sports.
'Cause we are warriors.